Hey everyone, welcome back. We're diving into something today that's seriously a game changer for anyone learning English,
Oh, yeah.
thinking directly in the language.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm so excited about this one.
It is fascinating.
It is. We
Yeah.
often get so caught up in grammar rules and vocab lists
Right.
that we forget about this really crucial mental shift.
Absolutely.
Our sources today highlight why just knowing English
Yeah.
isn't enough.
It's not enough.
It's about rewiring your brain
Yeah.
to think in English, and that's where real fluency happens.
And one of the biggest obstacles to that rewiring is our tendency to translate from our native language.
Right, like when you hear apple,
Yeah.
you automatically think of the word for apple in your first language and then translate it back to English.
Exactly. And while that might work for basic words,
Yeah.
it becomes a major roadblock
Yes.
to fluency.
Totally.
Think of it this way.
Okay.
Imagine trying to solve a complex math problem, but you're constantly switching between two different calculators.
Oh.
It just slows you down and makes things more complicated.
That's such a good analogy. Our source actually compares it to running a race with a heavy backpack.
Yes,
You're putting in so much extra effort, and it's exhausting.
it is. And this constant translating holds you back in a few ways.
I-
First, it just takes too much time.
Uh-huh.
While you're mentally flipping through dictionaries, the conversation has moved on.
So true.
Yeah,
It leads to those awkward pauses and interruptions
Yeah.
that can make you feel self-conscious.
for sure.
You're always a step behind.
Yeah. And the second issue is accuracy.
Okay.
Languages don't map onto each other perfectly.
Right.
So word-for-word translation
Yeah.
creates clunky sentences that just sound not natural.
You end up with these textbook phrases that no native speaker would ever use.
Right, and perhaps the most important point our source makes is this.
Okay.
Relying on translation prevents you from truly living in the language.
Mhm.
You're always observing English from the outside rather than experiencing it from within.
Okay, so we've established that breaking free from translation is crucial.
Right.
But how do we actually think in English?
Well, the source provides 6 concrete steps.
Yeah.
But before we jump into those,
Yeah.
I think it's important to highlight the amazing benefits that come with making this shift.
Yeah.
Because let's be honest, rewiring your brain isn't easy.
You're telling me.
So let's talk about why it's worth the effort.
Okay.
What happens when you finally break free from that translation habit?
Yeah. What happens?
Well, first, conversations become so much faster and smoother.
Okay.
Imagine responding to questions, instantly expressing your thoughts effortlessly.
Right.
No more mental delays.
Wow.
You'll be able to keep up with native speakers and really participate fully.
That's what everybody wants, right?
Yeah,
To have a natural flowing conversation without feeling like they're constantly playing catch up.
absolutely. And another incredible benefit is that you start picking up on the natural rhythm and flow of English. Those idioms, slang expressions, contractions,
Yeah.
all the nuances that make the language come alive.
It's like you're finally absorbing the music of the language.
Yes.
Those little things are so hard to grasp when you're stuck in translation mode.
Exactly. And because you're experiencing the language more directly,
Yeah.
your brain starts forming stronger connections. Learning new vocabulary and grammar becomes much easier.
It's almost like your brain is creating a dedicated space for English, right?
Yes.
Instead of trying to cram it into an already crowded room.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay.
So we've got the why.
Yeah.
Now let's dive into the how.
Okay.
Our source gives us 6 practical steps to start thinking in English.
Great.
What jumps out at you?
Well, the first one, label your environment, seems pretty straightforward.
Huh?
But I have to admit, it sounds a bit childish.
Yeah?
Do adults really do this? Does it actually work?
It might sound simple,
Yeah.
but it's incredibly effective. Remember, we're trying to build direct connections between English words and the world around you.
Right.
So start by labeling everyday objects in your home. Your fridge, your coffee mug, even your toothbrush.
Okay. I can see how that constant visual reminder could help. But
Right.
is it just about memorizing words?
It's much more than that.
Okay.
Every time you see that label, you're reinforcing the connection between the object and its English name.
Okay.
Bypassing the need to translate.
Yeah.
Your brain starts thinking chair when you see a chair,
Uh-huh.
not the word for chair in your native language.
So it's like those flashcards you used in school, but
Exactly.
integrated into your daily life.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
It's about immersion and repetition.
Okay.
The more you expose yourself to English in a natural way, the more those connections solidify in your brain.
Okay, that's a good start.
Yeah.
What's the next step in this brain rewiring process?
Well, it builds on that idea of constant exposure.
Okay.
The source calls it narrate your day.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
It's as simple as it sounds. Talk to yourself in English throughout the day describing what you're doing. I'm making breakfast, I'm walking the dog, I'm checking my email. Simple stuff, but by verbalizing it in English, you're activating those language pathways in your brain.
So it's not about having deep philosophical conversations with myself in English.
Right.
It's about just getting comfortable with thinking and expressing yourself in the language, even for like mundane tasks.
You got it. And the beauty of this is you can do it anytime, anywhere.
Right.
We're literally turning your whole day into an English practice session.
I love that. Okay, so we've got our environment labeled and we're narrating our day like a sports commentator.
Yeah.
What's the next step?
This one's a bit more challenging, but really powerful.
Okay.
Start using an English-only dictionary.
Wait, what? Won't that be confusing?
Haha.
How am I supposed to understand the definitions if they're also in English?
That's the whole point.
What?
It forces you to engage with the language on its own terms.
Okay.
To think in English, to understand English.
I never thought about it that way.
Yeah.
So instead of my brain going Apple native language, word Apple,
Right.
it's forced to work within the English system.
Exactly. And you'll be surprised how quickly you start to pick things up.
Okay.
Plus, English definitions often use simpler language than you'd expect, and they often include example sentences, which is super helpful.
Okay. I'm willing to give it a try.
Great.
So what comes after we've tackled the dictionary challenge?
This next strategy taps into something we all do naturally, visualizing.
Oh, I like this one already. I'm a very visual person.
It's incredibly powerful. The idea is to train your brain to associate English words directly with images or concepts, skipping the translation step altogether.
So instead of seeing the word apple and thinking the word in my native language,
Yeah.
I should picture an actual apple.
Exactly. See a red, juicy apple in your mind's eye. Really focus on the details, its shape, its color, the way the light reflects off its skin.
So I'm basically creating a mental image dictionary.
You got it. And this technique isn't just for concrete objects. For abstract ideas like happiness or freedom,
Okay.
try to conjure up a feeling or a scene that represents that word for you.
This is starting to feel less like studying and more like daydreaming in English.
That's a great way to think about it. It should be engaging and enjoyable, and the more you practice, the easier it will become to automatically think in those English images.
Okay, I'm definitely adding this to my mental toolkit.
Great.
So what comes after we've mastered the art of visualization?
Well, this next one might seem obvious, but it's crucial. Immerse yourself in English media.
You mean like watching movies and TV shows? I do that already.
That's a great start, but don't just passively consume it. Actively engage with the material. Try pausing the movie to predict what will happen next, or retell the plot to yourself in English.
So it's about turning my couch potato time into active learning time.
Exactly. If you're listening to a podcast, jot down any new words or phrases you hear and look them up later. Turn those subtitles off and really challenge yourself to understand what's being said.
This is reminding me of that saying, the best way to learn to swim is to jump in the pool.
Right.
It's about surrounding myself with the language and forcing myself to think in English.
You got it. And remember, it doesn't have to be perfect. It's about progress, not perfection. Start with material that's enjoyable and easy to understand, and gradually challenge yourself with more complex content.
Okay, that makes sense. I'm starting to see how all these strategies build on each other.
Yeah.
We're labeling our environment, narrating our day, using English-only resources, visualizing, immersing ourselves in media.
Right.
What's the final piece of the puzzle?
All these steps lead up to the most important one, speaking with others.
Okay, that's where the rubber meets the road, right? But isn't that also the scariest part?
It can be intimidating, especially if you're worried about making mistakes. But remember, everyone makes mistakes.
Yeah.
It's part of the learning process.
Easier said than done, though. I still get nervous sometimes talking to native speakers.
I understand. But the more you practice, the more comfortable you'll become. Find conversation partners, whether they're native speakers, fellow learners, or even just online language exchange partners, and just start talking.
So it's about pushing past that fear and just diving in.
Exactly. And remember that progress over perfection mindset we talked about earlier?
Yeah.
Don't aim for flawless English, aim for communication.
So even if I stumble over words or make grammar mistakes, the important thing is that I'm getting my message across.
Exactly. And as you practice, you'll start to notice those moments where you're no longer translating in your head. You'll catch yourself thinking directly in English, and it will feel amazing.
That's what I'm aiming for, those moments where the language just flows naturally.
Yeah.
So to recap, we've got 6 powerful strategies.
Right.
Ladling our environment,
Mm-hmm.
narrating our day, using English-only resources,
Yeah.
visualizing, immersing ourselves in media, and speaking with others.
Yes.
And the key is to approach all of this with a progress over perfection mindset.
You got it. Now, while these strategies are incredibly effective, there's one more crucial element that often gets overlooked.
Oh, what's that?
No.
Some secret weapon.
You could say that. It's all about understanding how our brains learn languages.
Okay, now we're getting into the science of things. Tell me more.
Our source points out that language learning is about building new neural pathways in our brains. It's literally rewiring the way we think.
So it's not just about memorizing words and grammar rules, it's about changing the physical structure of our brains.
Exactly. And that takes time and effort. It's like learning to play a musical instrument or training for a marathon. You wouldn't expect to become a concert pianist overnight.
Definitely not. It takes consistent practice and dedication.
Exactly. And the same goes for language learning. There will be days when you feel frustrated, when you feel like you're not making progress.
Right.
But it's important to remember that every time you practice, even for a few minutes, you're strengthening those neural connections.
So it's like those tiny steps that eventually lead to a big transformation.
Exactly. And that brings us back to the importance of mindset. Embrace the journey. Celebrate the small victories and never give up.
I love that. So it's not just about the strategies themselves, it's about approaching the whole process with the right attitude.
Absolutely. And remember, you're not alone on this journey. Countless others are working towards the same goal.
That's really encouraging.
Yeah.
It's easy to feel isolated when you're struggling with a language.
Yeah.
But knowing that others are going through the same thing makes it feel less daunting.
Exactly. Connect with other learners, share your experiences, support each other. It makes a huge difference.
Okay, so we've covered the strategies, the science, and the mindset. But before we wrap up, I want to touch on something our source mentioned that really resonated with me.
I'm curious, what stood out to you?
It was this idea of reframing the way we view mistakes. Instead of seeing them as setbacks, what if we saw them as opportunities for growth?
That's such a powerful shift in perspective. It's so easy to get caught up in the frustration of making mistakes. But each one is actually a valuable learning opportunity.
Yeah, it's like those fail compilations you see online.
Yeah.
They're funny, but they also show that even experts mess up sometimes.
Exactly.
It's part of the process.
And in language learning, those mistakes are gold mines of information.
Okay.
They highlight areas where you can improve.
So instead of getting discouraged, we should embrace those mistakes and analyze what went wrong.
Absolutely. Figure out the correct way to say it and then practice, practice, practice.
It's like having a personal language coach pointing out exactly what you need to work on. And speaking of coaches, the source also emphasized the importance of finding support.
Yes. Don't be afraid to ask for help, whether it's a teacher, a tutor, or even just a friend who's more fluent. Having someone to guide you and answer your questions makes a huge difference.
It's like having a cheerleader on the sidelines encouraging you to keep going. Because let's be honest, this journey to fluency can be challenging.
It definitely can be. There will be moments of frustration, moments when you want to give up. But remember those incredible benefits we talked about earlier, the ability to connect with people from all over the world, to express yourself confidently, to unlock new opportunities.
Yeah, it's like climbing a mountain.
Yeah.
It's tough, but the view from the top is breathtaking.
Exactly. And just like with mountain climbing, you don't have to do it alone. Find your tribe, your support system, the people who will motivate you and celebrate your successes along the way.
I think that's such an important message.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of thinking in English, what's the one key takeaway you want our listeners to remember?
I would say this fluency isn't a destination, it's a journey. It's about embracing the process, the ups and downs, the mistakes and the triumphs.
It's about progress over perfection.
Right.
And never giving up on that dream of thinking in English.
Exactly. Remember that every step you take, no matter how small, brings you closer to that goal.
So whether you're just starting out on your English learning journey or you've been at it for a while, we hope this deep dive has given you some new insights and practical tips to help you on your way.
Remember, you are capable of achieving fluency. It's within your reach. Believe in yourself, stay persistent, and never stop exploring the amazing world of English.
And if you enjoyed this deep dive, be sure to subscribe to the show and share it with your fellow language learners.
We'll be back next time with more tips and strategies to help you on your path to fluency. Until then, keep practicing, keep learning, and keep those conversations flowing.
Thanks for joining us.